Hello and welcome back. This is the American Sedevacantists. Today, we're going to react on a YouTube video. Well, today's video is coming from Brian Holdsworth, and his video is titled The Despair of Sedevacantism. Already, I am not looking forward to this, but not because I'm in despair. I just think that's a terrible way to frame it. But whatever. We're gonna start right in here.
In times of crisis, it's easy to sympathize with people who are willing to consider extreme solutions to the extreme situations that they find themselves in. And if you're a Catholic who is paying attention today, it shouldn't be hard to admit that the situation we find ourselves in is extreme, which is...
Yeah, it's a pretty extreme situation. There's a, whole crisis in the church. There's a whole traditionalist movement fighting off against the modernists, and then there's the conservatives who don't really help anyway. But you know what? We'll let that aside for now.
This is why I really don't sympathize with Catholics, and especially prelates who are just carrying on as if it's business as usual. The sheep of the flock are...
I don't know who's really carrying on as business as usual in the Novus Ordo, but that's neither here nor there.
Hurting, they're confused, they're disenchanted, and they're in need of a reassuring voice. And in the absence of an authoritative reassuring voice...
Whoa. Absence of authoritative voice? Brian basically just did the sedevacantist argument for us, which is basically there's no authority today. The church is currently in a state of privation of authority. If there was divinely assisted authority, well, we would have a pope. But that's a continue.
There are those who will happily lead people astray with easy answers. And if I had started my channel...
I know he's going to say that Sedevacantism has the easy answer, but I think the easiest answer is to say, well, we still have a pope. And yeah. Just follow the Pope, or sort of sometimes. This is why this is going to be a painful video, guys.
Like 10 years ago, I think it would have been uncommon to come across comments and feedback that say things like, the Vatican II church is false and is a counterfeit church, and you're a false prophet for supporting them, or just simply, Sedevacantism is true. I mean, those kinds of voices would have existed, but I think you would have to go searching for them in order to find them. Whereas today, those voices have conspicuously multiplied so that...
I wonder why that is. I wonder why Sedevacantism has grown today. I wonder if it has something to do with the crisis in the church.
On virtually every video I publish, I see those kinds of comments popping up. And so, to reiterate, I sympathize with people who are struggling to make sense of things. Things are not nearly as neat and tidy as they once were, especially for those of us who try to defend the Catholic position through something like apologetics. Today...
I don't think it's been neat or tidy for the past 50 years for the Novus Ordo, but I guess these guys have been living in their own bubble.
There are any number of scandals that we have to contend with, and although there...
Well, okay, hold on. Sure, there are a number of scandals going on, but Sedevacantists don't argue against scandals per se. I mean, the reason why they're scandals in the first place is because they're contrary to faith. If the purported church is teaching evil, sanctioning evil, it's probably a very good sign that that church is not the Catholic Church, and that the Novus Ordo is not the Catholic Church. But let's continue.
There has been a lot of lip service to address those scandals from the highest authorities in the church. Their actions demonstrate that they are at best complacent, and at worst, they are perpetuating, nurturing, or even encouraging the patterns of corruption and behavior that have led to those scandals. And among...
Well, not even just behavior, legitimately enforcing heresy on the church. It's not just a matter of bad morals. If it was just a matter of bad morals, then there wouldn't necessarily be a Sedevacantist movement. There wouldn't be a traditionalist movement. There wouldn't be a resistance against Vatican II. It's not a matter of mortal sin, but a matter of heretical doctrine, evil doctrine being taught by authority.
In those very same sectors of the church, we find scandalously incoherent teachings, if not outright heretical teachings.
Sorry, let's back that up here. Let's go, hold on.
We find scandalously incoherent teachings, if not outright heretical teachings.
Whoa. Heretical teachings. Brian, that sounds quite despairing, actually. The Catholic Church, in her ordinary magisterium, in her extraordinary magisterium, in her ordinary and universal magisterium, cannot err, cannot teach heresy. If the church that you're a part of is teaching heresy, you're in a defected church. That is not a Catholic church. That is a reason to despair. Now, one should not despair. One should have supernatural hope in God and should reject the heretics that are teaching that heresy instead of defending them. And yeah.
Which makes those of us who are trying to reconcile our beliefs and our experience of the church today with the historic tradition and the infallibility of the church, let's say, anxiety-inducing. And more recently, there was a debate published online about the topic of Sedevacantism.
That debate. I mean, it wasn't even a good Sedevacantist. It was actually a Feniite heretic, Brother Peter Diamond. And then we had someone, Jeff Kassman, who isn't even really... He's an indult Catholic that likes the SSPX, so he wasn't even a good representative of the SSPX. So overall, that debate was... fortunately really bad from my point of view, because really a true Sedevacantist cleric, a priest or a bishop should have been in that debate, not a Feniite Benedictine monk, not a heretic. But let's continue.
That has amplified that anxiety for a lot of people. And
well, the Sedevacantists aren't amplifying anxiety. Far from it. Francis is doing plenty good of that himself. So again, you're kind of making a scapegoat of Sedevacantism for the fears and despair that people are suffering in the Vatican II religion.
And because there have been responses published by competent thinkers and apologists like Trent Horn and Michael Lofton, I'm not going to try to repeat what it is that they said, but I would encourage you to check out those efforts and bring to them the same kind of open-mindedness that you brought to that initial debate. And if you can't do that, then maybe ask yourself if it's possible that you're just looking for satisfaction and justification for your indignation and anger.
Whoa, what is this about? Indignation and anger? Yikes. I don't want an open mind, I want a Catholic mind. I don't want to have to be open to heresy, and therefore I reject it, because that is the Catholic mindset. So I don't understand why you're arguing about an open mindset, when the matter at hand is about a teaching authority teaching heresy. We should reject it as Catholics, and that is what we should do.
It might be that you just want to give yourself excuses not to be meek and humble of heart, as the reading from this past week's epistle in Ephesians at the Latin Mass in the traditional cycle of readings implores us to do for the sake of unity in the church. But the thing is, though, the Vatican II religion is not united. If I return to the Vatican II Church, the Vatican II religion, basically I'll be in the same communion as Father James Martin. Now, these people can say that James Martin is a heretic, but he's a Catholic in good standing in the Novus Ordo religion. He's not a rebellious cleric. He's actively being promoted by Francis. Why would I want to be a part of a church that is actively promoting open heretics, or at least openly, let's say, close to heresy of clerics? Why would I want to rejoin that religion? About indignation is that it's dependent upon anger, and for anger to be sustained, it will have to compete with your reason.
Well, no, this is nothing to do with anger, really. It has to do with reason. Is it reasonable to be in communion with heretics? No, it isn't. So therefore, you must reject them.
Righteous anger and indignation are good insofar as they might be appropriate responses to some grave injustice or something like war. But if they are sustained for too long, then you're going to start to forfeit your reason. So be aware of that, and instead, come, let us reason together. Now, the trouble...
Yes, let us reason together. I don't know what kind of people Brian talks to who are sedevacantists, but we have whole pages, we have whole websites basically creating syllogisms, reasoning out why we are sedevacantists. There's nothing angry about. Look at these guys. Look at Kevin Davis, Catholic Family Podcast. You can't meet a nicer guy. I mean, this guy is not angry at all. Not an angry bone in his body. Mario, though, Mario strikes me as a choleric, so he's gonna be he's a bit angry, but he's very lovable. Great guy. But Mario, you are a cleric. I could see that. A little bit angry. Look at those eyes. Oh man, where were we?
With Sedevacantism, as with any mature or maturing belief system, is that as they mature, they will produce a variety of incarnations, and the same is true with this particular belief. So with this video, I'm not going to try to reply to all the different variations of it, but...
Well, yes, there's many different variations of Sedevacantism, but ultimately the traditionalist movement has the four marks of the church, which is the rejection of Vatican II and the new Mass. If anyone's adding anything extra, that's say like the Feniites, well, they're heretics and not Catholics. And that has nothing to do with the Sedevacantist position, the rejection of the baptism of desire, which not at all. And Sedevacantists, altogether, they recognize that there are matters of opinion that they do not agree on. It's not like there's competing communions of Sedevacantists that are excommunicating each other and that sort of thing. Well, there probably are the fringe groups, but altogether, there's a consensus that that's not a thing.
But more specifically to the one that was offered in that debate and which has been a source of conversation and anxiety for a lot of people. And so...
Well, okay, then he's just bringing up Feniite Sedevacantism, which again... You shouldn't say that's the despair of Sedevacantism, but rather the despair of Feniism, not Sedevacantism, because ultimately Sedevacantism and Feniism, they're two different belief systems. Now, a Sedevacantist can be a Feniite, and a Feniite might not be a Sedevacantist. They're not related, but one can adopt both or either or none of them.
So according to that belief, Pius XII was the last legitimate pope, and that the chair of St. Peter has been vacant ever since then. And since that was many generations ago, that means that there are no longer any validly ordained bishops, and without bishops, there is...
Well, hold on a second. Now that is actually a distortion. Even the Diamond Brothers will claim that there are valid bishops, such as the Eastern Catholic bishops, the Eastern Orthodox, who are not Catholic bishops, but still valid bishops, and that there are still valid Sedevacantist bishops from the Took line. So this is an immediate distortion of the Sedevacantist position. I would say, and even the Diamond Brothers would say, that the Novus Ordo bishops are invalid. But there are a couple valid bishops. I believe they're down in Campos, Brazil. But that's because they were consecrated in the Old Rite. And I believe even Cardinal Arinze is still a valid bishop.
There's no longer a church or sacraments. Now,
again, that's false. Even the Diamond Brothers would say there's still sacraments. They still have people going to confession, even though it's ridiculous, the guidelines that the Diamond Brothers have for confession. And let's say the Eucharist. But that's complete distortion on the part of Brian.
That's an interesting implication if you consider the fact that one of the key grievances of a lot of the radical traditionalists, and especially Sedevacantists, about the post-conciliar church and the Vatican II teachings has to do with this idea that there is no salvation outside of the church.
Well, again, that's another distortion. The vast majority of Sedevacantists do not hold that position. there are far more Sedevacantist priests and bishops and just parishes full of people that are not Feniite. Again, that is another distortion on Brian's part. I want to say that these are not. I don't think he's doing this in bad faith. I think he just hasn't fully researched the issue.
But if, as they argue, there is no longer a visible church with true sacraments, then there is no salvation either, not just for those of us who have been duped.
Well, again, this is more talking about the Home Aloner conundrum rather than the Sedevacantist one. So, again, this is, and not even the Diamond Brothers are Home Aloners. So, again, this is just a distortion.
By the supposedly heretical Vatican II sect, but also for them as well. If we have to be a member of the visible church to have a hope of salvation, and there is no longer a visible church with valid bishops and priests and sacraments, then there is no hope of salvation for anyone. Which brings me to a question which I don't really see answered in their position, but it's an essential thing that has to be answered, which is, if we are to give our assent to that position, to the truth of that supposed position, then what is it that we're supposed to do with that truth? Do we join another sect, another church sect? Well, they would say no, because there is no longer a church. It doesn't exist. At least Protestants, when they split away, they gave you some sort of alternative. They had some sort of plan of salvation for the souls that came along with them. But if you embrace the Sedevacantist position, you have to believe that the content of your faith and the practice of the sacraments that you have been participating in your whole life have been nothing more than an empty facade. Every time you thought you were encountering Jesus in the priesthood and the sacraments...
Again... the Novus Ordo sacraments are invalid, but the traditional sacraments are not. The SSPX have valid sacraments, at least for the most part. The Sedevacantist clergy have valid sacraments. So again, we're focusing too much on something that the Diamond Brothers don't even hold. So I would say this is probably a logical fallacy, and that, again, Brian, you need to read up more.
In your prayer life, in confession, he actually had his back turned to you, because there is no hope for you to be saved, since you are necessarily outside of the church because it doesn't exist. And as the Sedevacantists contend, there is no salvation outside of the church. According to their website, instead of going to Mass on Sundays, you should stay home and pray the rosary, because there are no valid Masses and no valid...
Well, no, this is a distortion. I'm not defending the Diamond Brothers here, but they basically say there's no licit options for the sacraments because they're Feniites, so they don't think there's any licit priests to go to. So they would say that there are valid clergy, but they're imposing heretics, which is a ridiculous term. It's so ridiculous you're not going to find it in any theological manuals. So again, it's a distortion of the Diamond Brothers position, but I can see why he would say that, because it's kind of hard to read into that, but that's what they mean. And I speak as someone who used to be a follower of the Diamond Brothers. Obviously not anymore. I actively reject that position, and I actively defend against it. I actively defend the baptism of desire.
Priests anymore, to which I would say, why bother praying the rosary? What good is prayer going to do without sacramental and sanctifying grace? According to Jesus...
Well, Brian, there are Catholics who aren't able to go to the sacraments, and I don't know what you're arguing here now, but one can very much have the state of grace without the sacraments. We call this the perfect act of contrition. Now, for the unbaptized, that'd be the baptism of desire, which is, again, contra Feniism, but just wanted to point that out.
Unless we eat his flesh and drink his blood, we will have no life in us, and that's clearly not available to us if there are no valid priests and no valid priesthood. And if we've committed any mortal sins, we have no recourse to the sacrament of confession. So we are doomed any way you looked at it. God has abandoned us according to the position of Sedevacantism. So why bother praying the rosary if that's true? Again. Prayer is something that a person with the virtue of hope does, but the only logical reaction to that position that they are offering you is despair. So here's a logical principle that I want to propose to you, and if nothing else is convincing you in this video, I hope that you will pay special attention to this. It's something that I think we need to observe whenever we encounter claims of truth, especially ones that are provocative and compelling, usually because of the scale of the audacity of these claims. For those of us who are fallen, for those of us that have been told that God so loves us that he gave his only begotten son, and that these are the lengths he will go to seek out, to find, and to rescue the lost sheep. For those of us in that position, when we encounter the truth or any claims of the truth, it should facilitate a way forward for us. It should instill hope in us for what that truth can do for us. For example, when Jesus proclaimed the kingdom, he followed it by saying, repent and believe. There was something in it for us to do in response to that revelation of truth. And every iteration of God's revelation throughout salvation history has followed a similar pattern. He revealed truth to them and then called them to act upon that truth, which leads me to the principle, and I want you to pay very close attention to this.
That's all nice and good, but if you actually set up this little logical path well, you wouldn't be misrepresenting an entire theological position. I let him go on that little tirade there about this little logic thing, but his logic all falls apart because he doesn't even set up a steel man, he sets up a straw man. And again, I don't like to defend the Diamond Brothers here, but I don't want to distort them either, so... yeah.
If a supposed revelation of truth only leads to despair and paralysis of the will, then it can't be the truth. The truth of God leads to the will. Revelation of truth only leads to despair and paralysis of the will, then it can't be the truth. The truth of God leads to hope, not despair.
Okay, now... does that apply to Sedevacantism? No. Because again, once one realizes that the Vatican II is false, and that Sedevacantism is the true position, they would go pray and, hopefully realize or find out that there are Sedevacantist clergy to go visit, that there are mass centers in the U.S. and internationally. Now, there are international clerics. Now, there's nothing despairing about this. We have multiple churches, multiple schools, multiple convents. There's nothing... we aren't home aloners. We aren't like the Diamond Brothers. There is a sacramental life that you can go to as a Sedevacantist. You just have to reject the Feenite position, which was condemned by Pope Pius XII. So again, this entire video just falls apart once someone looks at the pertinent facts.
That is spiritual discernment 101. If it leads to desolation rather than consolation, then it is from the devil.
Well, again, I would put it this way. What is not more despairing than a church that actively tries to damn you? Let me put that again. What is more despairing than a church that is actively trying to damn you? Because that is the Novus Ordo religion isn't trying to teach you Catholicism. It's trying to teach you modernism, Protestantism, indifferentism. And this is coming from the very authoritative documents of this religion. This isn't coming from a rebel. This is coming from John Paul II, Francis, Benedict XVI. These men who claim to be popes are teaching false doctrines. They're enforcing a false liturgy and evil disciplines. This isn't... to despair is to remain in that religion, to constantly feel attacked by your own clergy. I mean, you even have this whole canceled priests coalition in the Novus Ordo, where these priests who are actually preaching Catholicism by all metrics, they get excommunicated, or they're no longer priests in good standing. They lose their right to say mass. Well, it's not even a valid mass, but that's besides the point. it's more despairing to remain in that religion than to be a sedevacantist. As a sedevacantist, you're no longer attacked by your own clergy. As a sedevacantist, you're free from an evil, false pope. You're free to go to mass, knowing that that mass is not invalid, that it isn't teaching you evil doctrines, and it's not in union with evil hierarchs, heretical hierarchs.
And the sedevacantist position only leads to desolation. And from that position, it's ridiculous to say, stay home and pray the rosary. Why would you pray the rosary? Look at the content of those prayers. Look at the creed. I believe in the Holy Catholic Church and the forgiveness of sins. Well, no, you don't. The church is gone. St. Ignatius of Antioch says, wherever the bishop is, there is the Catholic Church. Forgiveness of sins? Well, not yours and not mine. Maybe someone else's at another point in time in another place, but not as a universal belief. Forgiveness is only available to the lucky ones. To recite that prayer as a profession of your beliefs, if you accept the sedevacantist position, is to lie to God. How about give us this day our daily bread, which St. Jerome, who translated the Vulgate translation of the Bible into Latin, which is like the gold standard of scriptural translations, translated that as our super substantial bread. It is the transmutated bread of the sacrament of the Holy Eucharist. But to pray that while staying home,
I don't want to say he's wrong there, but there is a definition from the Roman Catechism which may say otherwise. I don't want to say he's wrong, though. I just want to point that out, that the Roman Catechism does have a specific part on the give us this day our daily bread.
Home on Sundays is to say one thing and to do another. That's like getting a vasectomy and then praying to God for children.
Oh, that's actually... I see what he's saying there. I thought that was kind of funny.
What do you expect God to do with that prayer? It's completely incoherent. How about deliver us from evil? Not in the age of the great apostasy. You're stuck. You and I are stuck. We're the lost sheep that God isn't coming for.
What? Well, in the great apostasy, there's still going to be priests, bishops. There's going to be a mass. Well, there might be a theological opinion that the Mass will cease for 3 years, but that's besides the point.
In the end, I think you're stuck with something like a Pascal's wager. If you accept and choose the sedevacantist position, and you're right, you gain nothing. You have no eternal life because you have no church to mediate salvation to you. And if you're wrong...
Well, that's a very interesting point. I will just say WM Review, they actually do have an entire article on that exact wager. So I would go to WM Review, and I would definitely read Worth a Gamble by WM Review. A reply to the Sedevacantist wager. I would definitely read that.
It's the same result. If you reject that position and choose to believe that the church is still alive, albeit fighting for its survival, a fight, by the way, that it needs its best people for, and you're right, then you gain the hope of salvation and eternal life. If you're wrong, and it's actually a false church, then you haven't lost anything that the sedevacantists have gained. You're in the exact same position as them either way. So choose the position that gives you hope. Choose the option that gives you something to act on, that leads to consolation and not...
Well, I would say more than that. You're going to want a position that is the faith, that teaches the faith, that gives you hope and fills you with charity. Obviously, the finite position isn't going to do that. I am going to end it at that. I would invite Brian Holdsworth to actually study Sedevacantism instead of just talking about... Instead of just talking about a piece of cardboard, basically. So I want him to steelman Sedevacantism. I want him to understand that there is actually Catholics out there who hold the Sedevacantist position and that do live a Catholic liturgical life, that have mental prayer, that don't despair, that are actively living their lives, getting married, going to seminary, becoming bishops, priests, nuns, monks. I invite Brian Holdsworth to reject this position that he holds in Sedevacantism. I invite him to become a Sedevacantist, and I invite him to reject the Vatican II religion. And the only way you're going to do that is by prayer. You're going to need to call down the grace of God. Beyond that, you're going to want to study your faith. And when you come out of that, you're going to find that you're going to reject Vatican II. Again, thank you to all my listeners, all my viewers, and God bless you.